We will call this meeting to order. Can I get a motion, please, that the agenda for the November 25th, 2021 budget meeting be adopted as presented? Councillor Sherrard will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council approve the 2022 interim operating budget as presented? Councillor Bevan will make that motion, and we are joined by our General Manager of Corporate Services, Sarah Bittner. Take it away, Sarah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a presentation to share. I don't have Mr. Pacey with me today, he's on Zoom, so I'm running this, so I apologise if there's delays. So at the budget workshop, we had a council generally support of 4.9 taxation increase, which administration then reviewed the draft budget for opportunities to reduce that. If you remember, it was originally the starting point was a 7.74. So after our reviews and upon further consideration, we determined that an interim budget would be beneficial for this current situation. Some of the factors leading to this: it has been a short time since the election for this council to determine any priorities. So it made it a little difficult when you may trying to go through a budget and make decisions. We have some key members of our senior administration team that have only just recently joined the organisation. So we would like to work together with council over the next few months to develop a budget that balances your strategic priorities with community needs. Also, when looking through reviewing the draft budget, we would really like to have a full review of our fees and charges so that we can identify any areas that we might be able to get additional revenues from. This is an exercise that will take a little bit of time. Also, as usually there's the province doesn't pass their budget until later as well. Hopefully that will be passed in the spring as well, and who knows what can come from that. Sometimes that can throw a spanner and a wrench in the works when that's passed. Also, things like our assessment information is not available until the spring, nor our requisitions for the seniors or education, etc. Like that. One part of the fees and charges that you will see come forward very soon is the one for the utility rates. Because when this budget is passed, the utility rates are changing, we need to have those approved by council before January so that we can start the billing for the new year. So you will see that part come forward, but the rest of it we'd like to spend a bit more time with that. So that's sort of some of the factors that led us to this suggestion. With the Municipal Government Act, we do have to pass a budget by December 31st so that we can actually carry anything out next year. We have to have a budget passed. This is not a finalised budget, it's a placeholder budget. So as I said, if this allows us to carry out our operations as usual, we must have a budget passed. The changes can and will be made prior to passing the final budget in the spring. Any questions about interim budget information?
Council, have any questions? Continue on.
So let's move on to just a quick recap of budget workshop. So we're back into what's happened there. So we did present a budget with a total taxation of 7.74, which 4.99 consisted of costs that took us to maintain our current levels of service. So I actually just moved over to this next slide here. So that included the electricity, the policing contract, the adjustment to the photo radar contract, the collective agreement, wages and benefits, and those other obligations we have with insurance and contracts, etc., that may have inflationary parts attached to them. Also was the starting to decrease our reliance on subsidisations that we had put in over the last two budgets due to COVID. And then there was the other budgets and trends that we did, and salaries and benefits came in at a wash. We had 1% for salaries and benefits, and then other corrections and trends that are looked at every year came in at a -1. So that was our 4.99 base budget that we talked about. So what made them up about the 7.74 were service changes and additional budget requests that were brought forward at the workshop. So we kind of split them into different areas here for council to discuss. So this list here has no impact on taxation. So they're funded by reserves, other areas, a liability account in one instance, or they go to reserves. So any of these really don't have any effect on the taxation. However, that's still, council can still obviously discuss, deliberate, remove, postpone, etc. We gave them a little numbering system down the side just for ease of that, some of those discussions if need be. So just quickly running through them. The hazardous household hazardous waste program, that would be recovered through the utility billing for recycling. That's now one of our areas that is a cost recovery, net zero impact on taxation. The land use bylaw term position, we did have within the base budget a 200,000 for the land use bylaw that was being funded from reserve. This is a position that we're proposing so that we have somebody who is the champion of that project. It's a large project. I think it would be beneficial to have a term position for that rather than off the side of someone's desk. They can really get into this project. So because it is a term position, we looked at funding that from reserve as well, so no impact on taxation there. For economic development contracted services, the remuneration for the person is included within our base budget for an economic development officer. However, this $100,000 is proposed to come back from the loan that we gave to Community Futures West Yellowhead. We had a $300,000 loan program with them, proposing bringing 100 of that back to give that economic development person something to hit the ground running with, so to speak. Again, funded by reserve, so we need to know that that's not going to continue into the future and look into using taxation slowly to give them some budget to work with. Next project is the council chambers AV upgrade. This 50,000 is going to be moved put into reserve at the end of this year, because we did have something budgeted this year that hasn't been used, and would have come back from reserve next year to fund this. So again, no impact on the taxation for next year. Bridge inspections of 20,000. This year it's coming from a reserve. It is I believe, a 5-year cycle. Looking forward for that, I think we would look at maybe putting a little bit away each year, so that every 5 years we have that money waiting rather than having it sort of hit us every 5 years. Cemetery site plan, again, from the cemetery reserve. Now the sidewalk maintenance, there was $100,000 sidewalk maintenance in the budget that you saw at the budget workshop. We're proposing that this is actually moved over to as part of the capital project, the new $2.2 million project. After talking with Mr. Fisher, we're feeling that with this as being part of a larger project, the tenders before it would come in better, and we'd probably even get more than it is, rather than for a smaller project like this. So that's being proposed to be rolled into the capital project. The South Bay landfill closure report. The word closure should have made me spark this a lot sooner than this. But we always put something aside every year for landfill reclamation. When you are closing part of the landfill, this is closing part of the landfill, it will be funded from the liability account. It does not need to come from taxation. So that's why that's no longer having an impact on taxation. The next 3 items here are revenues that we proposed generating that will go directly to reserves. So again, no, they won't be offsetting taxation in any way. The first 2 are the water and sewer asset management plan increases. We had an asset management plan from I think about 2019 that suggested we raise water rates by 2.2% and sewer by 4.4% each year. And this money goes directly into a reserve for the future rehabilitation of water and sewer within our community. The grey water sales is also just a proposed revenue that we may be receiving from the sale of our grey water. Again, this will go directly to a reserve. If we get less than this, then a lesser amount will go. If we get more, then a higher amount will go. So we'll always have no effect on taxation either. Now, the last one here wasn't actually included at the budget workshop, but was discussed, was the playground zone speed signage. So we have come up with a budget of around 15,000 for that, and propose using the public safety initiative reserve to fund the playground zone speed signs. So I'll pause here for any discussions or questions on this listing.
Councillor Chenard.
Just on that gray water sales, because some years it's higher and lower, which reserve are we putting that into again? Like the money, the proposed sales from gray water, that goes into what reserve?
Through the chair to Councillor Chenard. At the moment, it's slated to go to the infrastructure reserve.
Okay.
It's at council's discretion or will that we can have a separate reserve or a different reserve at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bevan.
To the chair, to Sarah, on our playground speed zone signage and that, we're putting them up. Does school division give us anything towards that, or is that 100% ours that we have to fund?
At this time, I believe that this is all us at this time. I don't know if that has been looked into. I might have to defer that to our community and protective services team, if they have anything to add for that.
Mr. Beck.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, the question was, is that all on us for the signage, et cetera? Mr. Mayor, through the council, yes, that's all on us.
Even though the schools would like us to change it, we still have to 100% is ours.
Just to clarify, Councillor Bevan, the schools have not requested us to change.
No,
it.
but I mean, if they ever did.
Yeah.
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 I know they haven't, asked us, but if they ever did, if we could maybe make up something with it.
Councillor Moore.
Mr. Mayor, through to Mr. Beck probably. Does this replace the school zone speed limit signs? Or is it supposed to, or is it just an addition?
Mr. Mayor, through the council, yes, this was an initiative of past council to examine it, and we will have a discussion item to council probably January, on all the steps that are required. And we think it's feasible if council wants to proceed. And it would include all of those, yes.
So for the new members of council, at the last strategic planning session, we reviewed our school zones. Many are in non-compliance, and there is inconsistencies throughout our community within school zones and playground zones. So the idea here is to make it consistent throughout the community. We have received several complaints from people not understanding what the speed is at what times. And with the legislation that's in place, we have the opportunity to make it consistent across our community. So I look forward to that report. Councillor Byer.
Thanks, through the mayor to administration. On the asset management program water increase and sewer increase, is that going into a reserve for future upgrades to just the water lines, or just specifically on the wastewater treatment plant?
Through the chair to Councillor Byer. These I have created specific reserves for water AMP and sewer AMP. This is for the lines, it's not for the treatment plant. I should have a caveat on that actually. It's for items that were in our asset management plan at the time that was created. So it's going to be, it's mostly for the lines and the, it'll be for water with the replacement wells, etc., things like that. I have to delve into it a little bit deeper to get you a more detailed of exactly what is included. I don't believe the wastewater treatment plant is included. I actually have we have a separate reserve for that we're putting money into for the future replacement of that facility.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to follow up to that, Sarah, Ms. Bittner, then do we have plans on when we're planning on using that? Like I know we do have sewer lines that we have planned that, within the asset management plans that have to be repaired, and same with water lines. Is this something that we have to save up until we have enough to use, or do we have to use it for something extremely specific?
through the chair to Councillor Beyer. I would have to look into that for you. At the moment, I think this is the third year we're doing it, so it hasn't created a large reserve right now. But it would definitely be something that we could use if we wish to, towards something that is the older, not putting in new lines or things like that. We'd have to go to something that's rehabbing older infrastructure that was part of that plan.
Right, okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions, comments, or concerns? All right, we'll move on.
So the next slide we have here are some of the service changes and additional budget requests that do actually have an impact on the taxation. So just quickly revising these ones, the increasing of the cybersecurity and civic centre bandwidth, that's the cybersecurity for our service here, the actual physical service. The third-party 24-hour IT support and cybersecurity, that will be a 24-hour monitoring of our system. The cyber attacks are becoming more frequent and more and better than they have been in the past. They're always improving their ways in. So this will give us 24-hour support for that, as well as IT support for our IT department of one. They would run the help desk as well, be able to triage the things that they can fix rather than the things that need to come through, and give us some of that much needed IT support. The next one is the asset management GIS license. Now, this was part of our asset management database. We have maps, but they're more static. They're not interactive and sort of moving forward as things change. This thing gives us the ability to be able to draw those maps down and have a much better way to sort of show what's happening with the assets in our community. Building maintenance tools. This year, for the first time, we actually pulled some budgets from other areas and gave building maintenance their own budget, their own department. These are some of the things that they need to actually do some of their work, is to have some tools for that department. Moving on, we've also included the preventative maintenance practices. So these are things that obviously preventative in nature for our building maintenance team to start these practices, these rotations of inspections and cleaning. So it prevents some of those larger things that may have come our way if we're not aware of it. If a roof is needing work, we could, with these inspections, we'll be able to find that out before it gets to the point where it's much more expensive. And the last one that we've proposed for inclusion is to reintroduce some of the a transfer to reduce our reliance on the revenue that offsets taxes. The first one where we've proposed to use is for the public health facilities rent, as the lease is up within 4 years. So if that lease was to go away and we lose that revenue, that's a large hit on taxes in 1 year. So we propose slowly moving that out so that if that happens, it's just a reserve transfer that gets affected and not taxation gets affected. So those are the ones that administration are proposing to include within the budget that you see presented to you today. I'll stop for some questions here.
All right, any other further questions, comments, concerns? We hashed this out pretty well in our budget workshops, so not surprised. So is that all for this portion before we get into capital?
No, there's another couple of little slides.
Okay.
Moving on, just a quick slide here. These are the ones that we have removed from what you saw at the budget workshop. There were a few reserve transfer asks within that budget that we have removed. And after talking with relevant departments, the Bobcat rental for landfill was thought to be able to be put off, as well as external consulting reports for engineering. So that's just the list of the things that you would have seen in the budget at budget workshop that are no longer in this budget presented to you today. That's that for that slide.
Okay, any questions? I have a question through probably to Mr. Fisher. The external consulting reports for engineering, is that going to impact any of the items that we've discussed in terms of looking at sewer lines and things of that nature?
No, sorry, through to council. No, I don't expect that it will. Most of that stuff, the big picture stuff is captured in our capital plan this year. So we've got in there, and we'll get to it, but some money to look at the sewer stuff, and that'll happen with the operations program.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this slide? All right, can we move on?
So the last slide we have here, as far as an operating budget presentation, is looking at reducing the reliance on the reserves. So at the budget workshop, you see the 2021 lines there, those first three were the ones that we were starting to work on removing the reliance on, and that was about 1.6% of that 4.99. So to balance this budget to the 4.9, we had to look at a new energy reserve reliance of about 134,000, which will cover everything that you've seen in this budget and have it at the 4.9. Just wanting to show with this that the first two obviously are ones that they have that finite balance. We've already figured out what we need to do to help reduce our reliance on those going forward. The bottom ones with the energy ones, these ones will, if you look at this, will actually end up costing us more reserve. This is where it becomes an issue when we do this using reserves to prop up the taxation. If you go back the next year and put the entire amount back onto taxation, then this doesn't happen. But if you see with those bottom two lines, if you look out to the side, that's the total that's going to cost us for that reliance, for using that reliance of that amount of money. So the 107,000 from last year, once we slowly move that out, is actually having us use 260,000. And the 134, as we slowly move that out, actually has us using 389,000. So I felt this was an important slide to bring up. We can use reserves to bring taxation down, but that's always a cost, and it does come back to us as you move forward. Those are the amounts that will come out of that energy reserve to cover those two amounts. Yes, so that sort of concludes the presentation for. Oh, actually, no, any questions? I suppose I should let you ask some questions.
Any questions on this slide? Councillor Meyer.
Thanks, through the mayor to administration. So the way I am understanding this is that the way that we've been able to maintain that 4.9% that council was requesting of is by introducing another reserve that we're reliant on in order to kind of just do the status quo.
Through the chair to Councillor Byer, it's the status quo. It also includes all of those items that we talked about as well.
Yes.
Right, that's something that I think is quite important too. Even though this is an interim budget, once it is passed, the items that are included, it gives us the the okay, go ahead to start on those projects. So if this is passed with everything included, then administration will start on these projects come January, or can start on those projects come January. So just have to remember that if we get to spring and council might think, oh, we would like to remove that now, it might already be done because we might have got onto that in January. So just keep that in mind when you pass this today, that will include all the items that we have here. Sorry, Councillor Byer, your actual question has escaped me.
So you did answer it.
I did answer it, okay.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? Councillor Byer.
Thanks, through the mayor to council and administration. This is something that since our budget workshop, I've thought a lot about, and I am hesitant to introduce another reserve that we're reliant on. I am troubled by this, and I think the next couple of years, as long as we are reliant on all those reserves that were on the screen there, we are going to have extremely challenging budgets. Like that's not going to go away, and I think there's likely to be further downloading up from the provincial government as we've seen in the past 2 years. I can't imagine the next 2 years will be much different. And in 2020, when COVID hit, we were very progressive and kind of were some of the first councils at the municipalities at the table to do I think it was about a 5% tax decrease. Is essentially what we did, and that was before we knew any revenue was going to come in the form of grants or loans to help businesses or people or the CERB or anything. We reacted extremely fast, and that was, I feel, the right decision that we made at that time. You know, now we're in a position where we have to kind of get back from that. On the campaign trail, I heard many comments about our asset management plan and that we need to kind of get on that a little bit more. And over the past 4 years, we've tried very hard to get off of the medical center reserve, and it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. We had really good intentions and it just didn't happen. We tried really hard and it didn't work. Things kept coming up. The landfill caught on fire and we had to build a new snow dump, and things just kept happening. And I think it's unrealistic to think that we're not going to have that in the next 4 years either. Right now, some businesses are doing extremely well. This is the busiest our town has been as far as I think population and hotels and restaurants as it has been in the past 5 years. I'm very hesitant to just say that we are maintaining at 4.9 and relying on reserve to do that. We decreased taxes by 5% a few years ago. I don't think it's unreasonable that we have to make up for that. And by doing a 4.9, that's in my mind, I'm working at a zero. Like then we didn't gain. And meanwhile, we still have an increase in electricity and all these things that went up. So I'm very hesitant to kind of hold that line at 4.9. The electricity, the policing, the photo radar, all those obligations that we have, you know, that's 3% of it. Those will continue to happen. So I would be in favor of not relying on reserves as much as we are.
Thank you, Councillor Schnarr.
Through the mayor to just a comment. I'm somewhat agreeing with Councillor Beyer, but I mean, that's why we're passing an interim budget. To be fair, like we've explained that we have new council members, we have new staff. So that's why I'm really in favor of an intern. And some of these reserves we are relying on, like the energy and stuff, they're in play for the next several years. So I guess our work will be cut out for us in the next year to figure out how to address, because we need to figure out if we're cutting services, what are we cutting? So 4.9 is something I'm in favor of because we did cut in the previous years and I was all for it. But now as we recover, we do have to pay back. So all we can do is rely on for this year, pass the intern, and the next 12 months, the 7 of us got a lot of work to do. So just my comment.
All right, anybody else? Any comments, concerns? Well, I'll step into the fray here. This is a tough budget. This is going to be one of the most difficult. And it goes back to we need assessment growth in our community. We've been lacking that for a number of years. We have opportunities to grow that assessment, and that may be thinking outside of the box and trying some new things and addressing things like our land use plan and talking about economic development. Because if you don't have that assessment growth, our costs keep borne on the existing ratepayers, and that's just not going to be conducive when we have huge electricity increases, insurance, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm very, very excited about the administration team that we have here with CEO Beveridge and Ms. Bittner, who's been here for a while, as well as our new two new general managers that they'll have an in-depth review and look at what options might be available to us in the spring. I agree with Councillor Beyer. We got to get off these reserves. Because we're only kicking the ball down and every time it catches up to us. So I think our big focus needs to be on driving that growth and driving that economic development and getting some lots sold in Hillendale. So we can increase our tax base and hopefully encourage some new industry and new revenue opportunities in our community, and continuing to lobby our provincial counterparts to stop the downloading and giving us additional supports in order to achieve those goals. So I think an interim budget is the way to go. And as I mentioned before, I think we also have to look at priority-based budgeting and really delve into all of our costs and making sure that we are focused on the community priorities and this council's priorities. Anybody else before I call the question? You have anything else you would like to add, Ms. Bittner?
Is it too late to record a vote?
CEO Beveridge?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, through the council, I can attest to this has been one of the most challenging budgets that we've ever encountered. And you're absolutely right, reliance on reserves is not where we want to be. It was when we looked through the priorities that we knew of as far as, because of staffing, we're acting on the past strategic plan, right? And essentially, when we reviewed, and this wasn't a budget that we had a lot of excess within. And just to maintain with all of the excess costs, this was, there was no, I guess from the perspective, we did look as hard as we could to find efficiencies, but allowing for extra time, I think will be valuable. And I think the work of going into our fees and charges and also some of the other work that we need to do as a team, I think that will be valuable, and we will be able to bring back a better budget for this council to consider. Thank you.
All right. With that, I will call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council approve the 2022 capital budget as presented? Councillor Taylor will make that motion, and Ms. Bittner.
One minute, please. I'm trying really hard. I even practice this, and it's still not doing well. This one? Okay, thank you. Okay. So moving on to the capital budget. So it generally remained the same from what we presented at the budget workshop, with a couple of exceptions. We did add $1 million to the infrastructure rehab program for a total of 2.2. It would also incorporate the sidewalk maintenance that we had talked about within the operating budget. An additional $1 million is proposed to be funded from the future civic cultural facility reserve. Three items that you would have seen within the capital budget at workshop have been moved to operating budget. At the end, they do not result in an asset, which means they would, I would flow them through the operating anyway. So we try and pick those out from the capital budget so that we can show what the actual amounts would look like. So those three items were the civic centre roof inspection, the sanitary mains condition assessment, and the water master plan. So they have been flown through the capital budget that was presented today. So just to recap what is in the capital budget, we have the joint training tower between the Yallourn County and Edson fire departments. There's some work for the trails, the phase 1 on Vision Park, a Warmore Park site plan and a Lions Park plan, a park pond fountain, and then a couple of pieces of equipment for the Parks Department. Under building maintenance, public works mechanics bay furnace. is included in that. With this page here, the items in blue, you'll see they are actually carryover from 2021. The items in orange, a couple of provincial projects that we have a stake in, and so we always make sure, I always make sure we're funded in case they pop up, they need to be done. So we obviously have our multi-use facility for just a placeholder of 20 million. You can see we're starting to use the grants for that, so that's kind of exciting as we're moving forward with that project. Just the replacement of one pickup this year, the 2.2 million for the infrastructure rehabilitation program, a highway beautification feasibility design of 50, and highway crossing lights of 100,000. Then we have, as I say, some transfer over from 2021, as well as those other two projects. Building up a compost cell at the landfill. Under our energy projects, we have a civic centre boiler LED lighting refit and public works LED lighting as well. For the airport, we have a tractor and a mower deck, 2 pieces of equipment, and some repairs needed for the terminal building itself. Under utilities, most of those, as you can see, are transferred from 2021, but there is a reservoir retrofit of 225,000 as well for 2022. So with that, that's the capital budget that's being presented to you tonight.
All right.
Any questions on that before I move on?
Council, any questions on the capital budget?
I think we did.
Yes, we've gone through that quite extensively at budget workshop.
Okay. What I thought I would bring tonight as well is just a look at our debentures. This is included within the budget document, but I thought I would just pull these out just a quick discussion on them and any questions that council might have. So we can fund portions of our program or our major projects through borrowing funds. The MGA gives us the rules and requirements that we need to follow for that. So we have what's called both a debt limit and a debt servicing limit. So the debt limit is the total amount of debt that we can incur in any given year based on the revenue of the previous year. So as you can see, our debt limit equals 1.5 times our total revenue. The debt servicing limit is the total amount that we can pay back on its debt in any given year. And that's a quarter of our revenue. So looking at, it always goes from our last completed financial statements, which was December 31st, 2020. That time our total debt limit is 40 million with actual debt of 12.6. And a debt servicing limit of 6.7 million, actual payments were 1.5 million. So looking at this total debt limit, always have to keep in mind too that we do have a borrowing bylaw that was passed for the multiplex for a debenture for 9 million. So always have to keep that in our minds as well when we're looking at our total debt. So if that was added to our actual debt today, it would be at 21.6. Again, so just over half of our debt limit. Those limits change every year based on our revenues though as well. So I thought I'd just do a quick recap on debentures and also just show you the current ones that we have so that you're aware. As you can see from this slide, we have a number of debentures, but obviously all except one, you can see are funded. The funding source is local improvements. So this actually comes off the taxation for the people within those areas whose properties benefited from that project. So we borrow the money and do the work, but then we put that back onto those properties that benefit. Some of these are quite, have gone on for quite a long time, some are short. There's different ways they can be brought forward to the municipality. We can instigate one, like for 63rd Street. It was, if I remember, 10 or 15 years ago, it was a very dusty road. We proposed to pave that. So we had to reach out to the people that benefited and get a certain portion of them agreeing to that before we could do that project. Ones like 53rd Street, which is a street between Shoppers and High Road in, West Western. They approached us wishing to do that, so we were able to do that as well. So all of those ones that are under that local improvement are funded from those properties that benefited. The one that isn't, we have our wastewater treatment plant. So that's funded through offsite levies, have a portion of that, so they fund some of that payment every year. And the rest is called tax supported, but this one actually is one of the ones that is on our utility billing. You'll see the wastewater treatment plant on there. So all our utility bills in town that have that contribute towards the payment of that debenture. So I just wanted to just do a quick rundown on that and just ask if there's any questions on debentures from council.
Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Sharp.
To the mayor, to Ms. Bittner. When we take a debenture, when do we start paying it back? So say for the multiplex, we have the debenture approved. When do we start paying it back? When the project is completed, we started the project? What's the time frame for that?
Through the chair to Councillor Taylor. We can draw down debentures 4 times a year from what is called the Alberta Capital Finance Authority. It's an arm of the provincial government where municipalities, it's almost like a pooled borrowing. They can find out what municipalities need, go out, get the rates for us, etc. So when we pull them down, we then have to pay, we do 2 payments a year at 6 months intervals from then, from the time we draw that down.
Yeah.
So our first payment will be due 6 months from that date.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor Sharp.
Through the chair to Sarah. Hey, that on the wastewater treatment, just to refresh for the other ones, the 1475, I believe everyone pays, is that correct? Like on your utility bills, around $14, $15.
Yes.
So the money we collect, that pays the total loan payment, is that correct? I think that's where we originally calculated out. If we charge everyone the 1475, that would pay off the total loan payment for that one loan. Is that correct? Or
Through the chair to council, that pays off our portion of that. The offsite levies pays the other portion, and that is due back to us from offsite levies that come in. So there's a separate, a whole separate accounting thing for that. I could talk all day, but I'm sure he's going to hear all that part of it.
So just
so the offsite levy will pay that, so we pay that, but it's owed back to us from the offsite levies we collect from people into the future.
okay, so in between the offsite levies and the 1475,
Yes, it
that
pays
takes
for
care
it.
of that payment. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? All right, anything else, Sarah?
I did just put up the reserve totals. These are also included in the budget document that you have. There was this one I wanted to bring attention to, was the second one down, the revenue sharing reserve. You'll see at the moment a proposed balance at the end of the year of $3.5 million. But this is the one where we'd like to, if we don't receive that until later in the year, we like to not spend, sort of allocate a lot of that money until the following year. So at this point, we have a $3 million budgeted to go into that in 2022. So for that to continue on in the way that we would prefer that to happen, you can see there's a balance of 3.5. So there's, if we were wanting to continue with that, which is probably the best practice, there's not a lot of leeway within revenue sharing for things that may crop up in 2022 to continue along that line. So just wanting to bring your attention to that within the capital reserves. And I do also have the operating reserves as well. If there are any questions on the reserves that you might have had.
Anybody have any questions? Nope.
So motion on the table at the moment is that council approve the 2022 capital budget as presented.
All right. If nobody has anything else they'd like to add, I will call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. Getting a motion, please, the council approve the 3-year operational plan as presented. Councillor Bevan will make that motion. Bittner. Loading.
Take longer to say that. I did it again. Sorry. So moving on to the 3-year and 5-year plans. Tonight. So this is a fairly new requirement from the Municipal Government Act, but they do require municipalities to have a 3-year operational plan and a 5-year capital plan, and for your council to review them annually. These plans are not budgets and also can change as priorities change. So they assist the organisation to be aware of upcoming expenses and financial requirements. I mentioned at the workshop that for a number of years we were concentrating just on the next year. These plans that's starting to train us to look further out for these items that are coming up, and to help us better plan for those. So for the 3-year operational plan, this is, I believe, the 3rd year. It's still in its, what's a good word, infancy. There's a lot of work that I think we need to pop in for this. But so the 3-year plan is quite a simple document that looks like this. We just showed our total revenues and expenses. As you can see, the 2021 is balanced, as we must have a balanced budget. The ones forecasted out do not have to be balanced. They're just a plan at this stage, not a budget. Within your documentation, there is more detail that makes up these, so the revenues and expenses from each area. Going forward, as I said, they definitely are a work in progress. Going forward, I want to discuss with my new senior leadership team sort of strategies and timing for how we can implement these better, get better information for those upcoming years. We're slowly getting better as we go, but there's always going to be room for improvement. We also, our new budgeting software, Questica, will be coming into play next year, and that's going to help as well, because there are forecasts built into those that are going to help our departments be able to look into the future a little bit easier. So we're going to be, definitely we'll see an improvement in these operational plans moving forward from this time. There may be a change in timing of when they're brought to you, but I want to talk with my leadership team to see how we can best approach those. So the motion on the table for this is on screen.
Council, any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council approve the 5-year capital plan as presented? Councilor Barrow, make that motion.
Right, so the capital plan presented tonight comes in a summary form. This slide here just shows each of the 3 different areas within the organisation. And the capital plans for, you see the 2022 budget and a 5-year projection moving forward from there. The next slide is when we look at the available funding that we have for those particular projects at this time, or projects that we have funded into the future. So as you obviously see, 2022, again, balanced, must be balanced. Moving forward is some of the projects we have listed versus the funding that we have allocated to them at this time. And those differences is what's called a capital gap. So looking forward through this 5-year plan, you see over those 5 years, our total capital gap of $25 million. So there's obviously some work to do when we come through, moving on to budgeting 23 and then adding 28, etc. So it's a living, breathing document that will always change. The importance is that it helps us to know, it helps us with our strategic short-term decisions while taking into account the long-term as well. So, we can make decisions on the fly today, but if we don't know how some of those might affect us further down the line, they might not be the best strategic decisions to make. So these plans are in place to help us look forward and to understand the needs we have versus the available funding we may have. So that's the sort of the purpose of the capital plans. And again, these are things that we will be working on and improving as time goes on as well, as we move forward with our new leadership team. Any questions on this item?
Council, any questions? Don't see any.
Okay, so motion on the table is, for this item is on the screen.
All right, can I get a motion, please? Or we already have the motion, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. Easy peasy. That's all for you, Sarah. And we're gonna move on to item D, questions from media and public regarding items in this council meeting. I think we have Ms. Tate on the line. I don't know if she has any questions. She does. Go ahead, Adrian.
Good evening, everyone. I actually have a series of questions, if that's okay.
Go for it.
The first one is, do you anticipate, Mr. Mayor, the return to the interim budget format moving forward? I know the previous council had moved to passing a firm budget by December 31st. I'm wondering if this is a 1 year or due to the changes in administration, or if this is what you anticipate to return to in future years as well.
So Ms. Tate, this is for sure 1 year thing for now, but administration may have different plans down the road, depending on the fluidity of the situation, and looking at things like priority-based budgeting as a part of our strategic plan to deal with our financial challenges, as all municipalities are having right now.
Okay. The second question I have is regarding the cybersecurity line item there. You mentioned, or it was mentioned about cyber attacks. Have there been cyber attacks on town tech, or is this a concern to prevent possible attacks?
So I can speak briefly and maybe I'll hand things over to Ms. Bittner. I'm not aware of any specific incident, but I am aware of some municipalities having their systems compromised due to cybersecurity issues. Ms. Bittner, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add to that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Adrian. Not actual attacks, not actual things happening, but we can see, or the IT department person can see when people are trying to access our server, access our information. And that's getting more prevalent as time is going on.
Okay. The next question I have is regarding the highway crossing lights. Is that not up to Alberta Transportation as it is a highway, or is that on the town?
So with that issue, we continue to engage with Alberta Transportation on the issue. They have indicated that our traffic counts do not warrant additional crossings at this point in time. One could argue how they come up with their counts and their criteria. You get more points if you have a tragic incident, unfortunately. And so we have included some funds in there to deal with the intersection by, I believe, A&W as a part of some of our discussions we've had in the past, because if we wait, it'll be another 10 years before we see another set of traffic lights. And these would be pedestrian crossing lights, not full-fledged traffic lights. But once again, this council will be having a strategic planning session here in January. May have different ideas, but we'll see where that goes.
Okay, thank you. And I do have one more, if I may. Through the mayor to Ms. Bittner, I believe. Are we able to renegotiate the interest rates on debentures? I noticed the one for Glenwood is at 5, a little over 5%. The one on 53rd Street is just over 2%. They're both due in 2023, so I would think probably same timeframes. Is that something that's possible? Can you renegotiate like you could for a mortgage or another loan?
Through the chair, unfortunately not. As I said, the Capital Finance Authority goes out and finds the best interest rate for all of the municipalities that are wanting to borrow that money for that on that day that we get that money, and that rate is set for the time of that debenture.
Okay, thank you.
We use them. All right, yeah, and Councilor Pacicci makes a point, as a municipality, we can only use the Alberta Capital Finance Authority. And some of those debentures are shorter and longer term depending on the project. So I think Glenwood was done way before 53rd Street, if I recall correctly. 53rd Street was a much shorter term length. All right, any other questions, Adrian?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
All right. With that, we will call the question, or I'll ask for a motion for adjournment, actually. Councilor Pacicci will make that motion. All those in favor? Motion carried.
Putting it into screen